Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm sharing some easy card making using card kits. I have the new Timeless Travel Card Kit from Love from Lizi. So these card kits are always packed with a ton of goodies in them, perfect for card making, but you could also use them for other projects as well. The thing that I love about card kits is that all of the items in the card kit work well together. They are color coordinated and you have a bunch of unique things already put together, which in my opinion takes part of the work in prepping for card making away because it's all done for you. So we have 5 sheets of solid cardstock here that work perfectly with the different papers in the pack. We have a sheet of peel off stickers. Then we have some 6x6 papers. These are absolutely gorgeous. This kit has more of a pastel or muted tones color palette to it, which is absolutely beautiful. After those printed papers, we have a stamp set that has 2 different images in it. I won't be using the images in this video, but I will be using those sentiments. There's a nice variety of different sentiments here. We have a package of pre-printed die cuts. These coordinate perfectly with those printed papers, also coordinates beautifully with the solid color cardstocks, and those sentiments in that stamp set are perfect for this. So you can see as we're looking through this, it's definitely a travel theme, but we also have some beautiful florals in it. So it definitely has a little bit more of a feminine vibe to it. Another thing that I think this kit would be fabulous for is if you're into making mini albums. I think this would make a beautiful travel themed mini album that would be great for some travel photos. So a ton of different pre-printed die cuts in here. Some of them are repeats, but just in a different scale. So for some of them, you can choose to use the larger one or the smaller one. It just depends on or the look that you're going for, what you want for the creation you're making. We also have some add-on things that you can add onto these kits. There's a couple different peel-off sticker packs. There's some specialty paper, and I will be using both the specialty paper as well, or specialty cardstock, as well as the 2 different add-on peel-off sticker packs in this video. And then we always have an embellishment pack, and these embellishment packs always have a different variety of things in them, perfect for the theme. There are some dies in here. You can definitely see that they are travel themed. We have some velvet trim, absolutely beautiful, perfect with that color palette as well. Some bows in different printed ribbons. There's also a couple of different sized gems that have an adhesive back on them. This little frame there is absolutely adorable. I don't actually use it in this video because it didn't really suit any of the cards that I had planned on creating, but it definitely suits the theme of this pack. 2 different woodcut tags, as well as a couple different sentiment strips, and then more trim and some beautiful paper doilies. And I will be using one of those doilies in one of my cards. I just love the color of it. I've never seen those paper doilies in that color before. There's also a little package of some travel themed charms that work well with this whole kit as well. So you can mix and match and you can pick and choose the pieces that you want to use, but it's always a selection that I wouldn't have put them all together. There's also some little red, really thin cord, if you will. I'm going to be using that on one of my cards just to add a little bit of extra texture to it. This is that specialty card pack. I'm going to be using that pink glitter cardstock as well as that dark tealy blue metallic one. I will be using this with some nesting dies. I'm going to be using the stitched ovals for these cards here, and I thought those metallic or specialty papers would make a really nice frame. Now, in order to have my specialty papers go a little bit farther, I'm going to be making those frames in 2 different sizes. So for one card, I'll use the larger size. For the next card, I'll use the smaller size. It'll have a similar look to it. The frames will just be different sized ovals. Otherwise, I'd have to use a lot more of this cardstock in order to get that look. This way, we can just make that specialty cardstock go a little bit farther. So I'm taping my dies down so that I can have a nice even space between those dies, and that tape is going to keep them in place. I'm going to be keeping that tape in place and then transferring this to that pink glitter paper to cut them exactly the same way. I also have the dies taped right to my cardstock so that that's not going to shift on the cardstock for me. I have it shifted to the side of the cardstock, so maybe on a future project I want to use the outside part of it, or say the inside, the inner part of the oval that I'm not going to be using for these cards. I run them through my die cutting machine, And easily we have some really beautiful frames. They kind of like to stick on that dice or that cutting plate there, but they do come off easily. Now, specialty papers die cut really, really well. I've never really had a problem with them. The glitter cardstock is just a little bit harder to pull the layers or the die cuts apart, just because of the different texture to it, but absolutely possible. And I didn't have to run it back through and run it with the blade facing up for a little bit more pressure on it. It die cuts fine. It just takes a little bit more to separate them. They don't just automatically separate like cardstock typically does. So once I have all of those done, I'm going to set those to the side. I've also die cut some smaller ovals to go within those frames, just out of the plain white cardstock that is in the pack. The only cardstock that I'm using that is not in the pack is I have some A2 card bases from my stash that I'll be using. For my sentiments, I'm just stamping them directly onto those die cut ovals with some dye-based ink that coordinates with the color palette in the papers. Now, you could heat emboss the sentiments, but I'll tell you right now, the sentiments themselves they're very scripty, and the heat embossing, it makes those sentiments a little bit thicker. So it makes it a little bit more challenging to read them. They're really beautiful sentiments, and I found that I had a better result with them when I just used ink to stamp them. I have another video that I did for the Love from Lizi channel if you want some more inspiration for this kit. I will link to that in the description box below. And for that video, I did that video before this one. I did the first three cards and I heat embossed the sentiments because I typically like to do heat embossed sentiments. I like that extra little bit of texture, but I did find that I liked the result better with just plain ink because it was a little bit easier to read those sentiments. I took a Dusty Rose ink and just did some light ink blending around that inner oval just to give it a little bit of visual dimension, a little bit more interest. And then before I did that, I just took the edges of that oval die cut and I rubbed it into an embossing ink pad. Then I used some ivory pearl embossing powder from Love from Lizi and just heat embossed around the outside edge. That ivory pearl powder is like a pale gold. It just adds this really beautiful edge to that die cut. Really, really subtle, but it catches the light nicely and it works perfectly with the different colors that we're using with this color palette. And it just adds a beautiful edge to it. You definitely want to do the heat embossing before you do the ink blending. Otherwise, when you add that ink, when you add that embossing powder, it's going to stick to all of that ink blending ink. So do the heat embossing first, then do the ink blending around the outside edges. Now, once I have my two die cuts on here, and I chose the one that has the stacked suitcases with the florals, I want it to add just a little bit of extra texture to those die cuts. So I'm just using some Stickles glitter glue from my stash. It just has an iridescent look to it, so it doesn't change the color, it doesn't add any color, it adds that extra little bit of texture and that extra little bit of sparkle. One thing that I find with pre-printed die cuts, sometimes you can find some that have some metallic in them or that have a little bit of foiling or some do have glitter on them, but sometimes just that print is a little bit flat because there's no texture to it or nothing to catch the eye. So adding that little bit of glitter glue adds that extra little bit of texture, adds that little bit of sparkle that catches the light when you're looking at the card. And the finishing touch to this card that also adds a little bit of extra texture is gluing on one of the charms from the embellishment pack. Now for these cards, I assemble all of them with some liquid glue. I prefer to use liquid glue simply because it gives you that little bit of wiggle room to move and shimmy things in place. The only time I never use liquid glue is with trims and ribbons because it likes to absorb the glue and then you get little glue marks on there. But for cardstock, specialty cardstock, for those charms, it works really well. For the second card, I'm going to start by stamping my sentiment again. This time I use that Dusty Rose ink for that sentiment. I really liked the look of that ivory gold embossing around the outside edge, so I'm going to start with that. After doing that sentiment, just rolling that die cut in the embossing ink and then adding that embossing powder around it. Now, the one thing to note, if you want a perfect trim, this is not the way to do it. Embossing around the outside edge, it's not going to have a perfect, exactly even. It's got a little bit more of a rustic look to it. I personally love it for certain things because I want that look, but if you're wanting something that's absolutely pristine and perfection, this is going to be just a little bit more rustic. Now for this card, around my mat or my background printed paper, I'm using the add-on stripe peel off pack, and I'm just adding a little bit of a border around that. For all of my cards, the printed papers are cut to 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I didn't do a double mat. Sometimes I'll do a double mat where I do printed paper and then solid cardstock behind. This time I just kept it really, really simple and just did printed paper. They're pastel colors on a white card base. So I just thought very simple was nice with these. I wanted the focus to be on the sentiment, to be on those die cuts in the center and those pre-printed die cuts. That peel off border though, it adds a really nice metallic touch and it just frames it in really nicely. And I just eyeball them when I'm putting them on. I don't put them right up to the edge of the paper. I want to say I put them like maybe a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. So you still see a little bit of that printed paper around the outside edge. And then I just use my scissors to trim those down. For the the long sides, I have probably about a 3-inch strip left over. I will just put those right back on the peel off sheet and I'll save them for a future project. Once I have that base printed paper down, I add my die cut ovals. Then I add my pre-printed die cuts to that. And I have an acrylic block here that I use regularly to hold things down flat while they're drying. The specialty cardstock especially likes to kind of curve up when we add the glue to it and when we glue it down. So putting that little bit of weight on that holds it down nice and flat. So once I have my die cuts on there, I wanted to add some of the peel off sticker butterflies. This one is the one that comes in the kit. It's actually a border with butterflies, but there's the inner piece of the butterflies that you can take out and use separately that I thought would look nice on that background. And once again, I'm adding that little bit of glitter glue to the center of those flowers because I just really love the look of it. I love the fact that it just adds that extra little bit of texture and that sparkle catches the light nicely. So with that done, we can set that aside to dry, and the amount of glitter glue that I add, they'll dry in probably about 15 minutes. They'll dry fairly quick. It really just depends on how much or how little you use. If you don't have a glitter glue like that, you could use a glue pen with some loose glitter. You could also use, say, a gel pen that has a shimmer to it to add that extra little bit of shimmer or shine. You could even use a metallic pen if you wanted to add some metallic touches to it. That would work as well. Again, it just adds that extra little bit of texture to the pre-printed die cut that can look a little bit flat on its own. So for that center oval there, I added my sentiment and I just did a little light ink blending around it. I opted not to do the embossing because I wanted them to be a little bit different. I didn't want every single card to be completely identical. I added my pre-printed paper to the background of the card, and this is the one that I'm going to use, that paper doily. Now I'm using it full on, but we're only going to see a little bit of the bottom left corner. If you wanted to make this go a little bit farther, you could easily cut this in half and have 2 pieces that you could use, one on this card and one on a future project. And then you could just extend the use of it. After putting that doily down, I glue my outer oval on first because it's easier to center that outer oval with the center or with the edges of the pre-printed paper, and then just center that inner oval. For this one, I'm using the little globe, and then I have a bunch of those floral die cuts. Now I put 3 of the floral die cuts on there, so you only see a little bit of that globe. You could reduce that and only have 2 if you wanted to see a little bit more of that doily or that white oval. I kind of changed my mind in here. I was going to eliminate one of the larger florals, and then I decided to just put it in anyways because that was the first plan for this card, so I just decided to leave it at that. But you can see that it does crowd out that globe a little bit. If you wanted to see the globe a little bit more, just reduce how many of those floral die cuts you have on there. And there are several of those floral die cuts to pick from in that pack, so you have different choices to pick from. So once again, I'm adding that little bit of glitter glue to those florals, and then I will set this aside to dry completely. And again, that stamp set has several different stamps in it for sentiment, so you can pick and choose which sentiments you want. For this one here, I'm using some of the gems from the embellishment pack on that background. I chose to just use 3 of them. There are 2 different sizes of those gems, so if you wanted a little bit of variety, you could use a variety of the different sizes from those different packs and change it up just a little bit. So for the next card here, once again, I'm going to emboss around the outside of that oval. I just really love the look of it, especially with that ivory pearl. You could choose a different color. I'm typically not a gold person, but I really love this one because it's just a nice pale gold, and it just has a beautiful almost a romantic feel to it, and I think it really suits the style of the printed papers and the die cuts in this pack. So once we have that heat embossed, we can add our sentiment to the background there. And because I'm stamping all of these sentiments with just a dye-based ink, I just use a damp microfiber cloth in order to clean my stamp off before putting it back in the package. That way I know that it's clean, and next time I go to use it, I'm not going to have a surprise little color of ink on there. Once we have our sentiment stamped, we can add the little bit of ink blending around the outside edges. Now, another thing you could do is use the stripe peel off stickers and go use those around the outside edges if you want. You can curve and bend them. They're really easy to work with. I've done them with arches before. You just press them down as you're going. They're really, really forgiving, and they come in a few different widths. For, say, an oval like this, I would probably choose the thinner width. The thinner the width is, the easier you're going to have, or easier time you're going to have curving it, but that's another way to add that little bit of metallic shine around the outside edge. So once again, I glue my ovals on there, and then I glue my die cuts on here. So for these cards here, I chose the architecture pre-printed die cuts as well as the florals. For the video that I did on the Love from Lizi channel, the modes of transportation pre-printed die cuts. So you can really have fun with the different ones, mixing and matching them. For this card here, I'm adding those little peel off hearts. This is again from another one of the add-on packs. I just thought these little hearts with the green worked well with the color palette for these die cuts, as well as the fact that they worked well with the sentiment that I chose for this one. Now, the shape comes in a few different sizes on here, so I do mix and match the different sizes. Now, typically when I put something on the background like this, I'll choose odd numbers. For some of the early ones, I only did 3. This one, I just filled it up just a little bit more. So you can pick and choose how much or how little of those you want to put on your background. It's up to you. And once again, the last step is adding the glitter glue to those florals. And again, you can eliminate this step if you don't want it on there, but I do think it adds a lot to the finished look of the card. And you could also, even if you wanted, before assembling your cards, if you know you're going to want that on there, you could just take all of your die cuts and put that on there so that they're ready to go when you're card making. The last step, I wanted to add one of those charms to this card, so I chose to use the little airplane charm. I thought it worked well, again, with the sentiment as well as those images. These cards are really easy to put together. The thing that takes the longest is figuring out which printed paper you want to go with whichever pre-printed die cut, and then just adding the different elements to it. I think the metallic frame really enhances and really frames it in. And because I chose to use an oval that is smaller than the inside of that metallic frame, we still see a little bit of that printed paper in between those two ovals. But you could, if you want, change the sizes of the ovals, have that center one a little bit larger if you didn't want to see that printed paper. So you can pick and choose the look that you're going for. But the final result, I think, is absolutely beautiful, and I really love the color palette with these and the little feminine touches that are on these cards as well as the die cuts. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time that you spend with me. I hope you have a fantastic day.